The morning was cold and silver when they brought Alira Voss to the stone circle. Frost covered the grass like a thin white sheet, and the entire Blackthorn pack had gathered to watch her die. She did not cry. She had promised herself she would not give them that. Instead, she walked with her chin lifted, her wrists bound with rope, her bare feet numb against the frozen ground. The crowd parted around her like water around a stone, some faces filled with pity, most filled with fear. They looked at her the way people look at something dangerous, something cursed. Alira was 22 years old. She had spent her whole life being blamed for things she did not do, simply because of the blood in her veins. Her grandmother's grandmother had been a witch, a woman who had cursed the Ashfall Alpha line generations ago after they wronged her. Nobody remembered the details of that old story anymore. They only remembered the fear. 3 nights ago, fire had swallowed the pack's grain stores. Weeks of food, gone in a single night, right before the harshest part of winter. The council needed someone to blame, and they did not look far. They looked at Alira, at her family name, at the whispers that had followed her since childhood, and they decided she was the answer. She had begged them to listen. She had told them she was home, asleep, when the fire started. Nobody believed her. Nobody wanted to. Now she stood in the center of the stone circle, and above her, on the raised platform where the Alpha King watched all pack matters unfold, stood Draven Ashfall. He was young to hold the throne, only 26, but he carried himself like a man who had already lived through more than most triple his age. His father had been murdered a year ago, torn apart by an enemy pack in a raid that still haunted the territory's nightmares. Draven had taken the crown in blood and grief, and since that day, he had ruled with a coldness that kept everyone, including himself, at a careful distance. He did not want to sign the execution order. Something in his chest had resisted it, a strange unease he could not name. But his advisors had pressed him for 3 days straight, telling him the pack needed reassurance, needed to see their king protect them from the old curse, needed a symbol that strength still sat on the throne. Regent Malcolm, his father's younger brother, had been the loudest voice of all. So Draven had signed it, and now he stood on the platform, watching the executioner raise his blade over a woman he had never spoken a single word to. The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The blade began its fall, and something inside Draven broke loose. It was not a decision. It was not even a thought. One moment he was standing still, and the next, his body was moving faster than his mind could follow, a force older and wilder than his own, while driving him forward. His wolf Kale had never before seized control like this, not once in all his years of training and discipline, but now Kale surged up from somewhere deep and ancient inside him, and Draven felt his own eyes burn gold, felt his nails lengthen into claws, felt a roar tear out of his throat that did not sound entirely human. He crossed the stone circle in 3 strides and caught the executioner's wrist, a single heartbeat, before the blade could reach her. The crowd gasped as one. Somewhere, someone screamed. Draven stood over Alira, his chest heaving, his golden eyes locked on the trembling woman beneath him. She stared up at him, too shocked to move, too shocked even to breathe. He could smell her. That was the strangest part. Beneath the fear and the cold and the blood rushing under her skin, there was a scent that hit him like a physical blow, warm and sweet, and achingly familiar, even though he had never known it before. Kale howled inside him, a sound of pure recognition. Mate. The word rang through Draven's mind, undeniable, absolute. His wolf had chosen her. Not tomorrow, not someday, but right now, in this exact moment, with the crowd watching, and the blade still trembling in the executioner's frozen hand. Draven released the man's wrist and stepped back, breathing hard, trying to force Kale back beneath the surface. His control returned slowly, his eyes fading from gold back to their normal deep brown. But he did not order the execution to continue. He could not. Every instinct in his body screamed against it. "Take her to the palace," he said, his voice rough. "She will be held there. The execution is postponed." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, confusion and disbelief. The Alpha King had just defied his own decree in front of the entire pack. Regent Malcolm's face, Draven noticed even in his shaken state, had gone very still and very careful. the way a man's face goes still when he is hiding something important. Elira was taken to the palace, not to a cell, but to a guarded chamber with a proper bed and a warm fire. She did not understand it. Hours ago she had been prepared to die, and now she sat wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, staring at the flames, waiting to understand what had just happened to her life. Draven came to see her that evening. He entered quietly, and she rose to her feet immediately, some old instinct telling her to stand in front of the man who governed her fate. He looked different now than he had on the platform, calmer, more human, though there was a tightness around his eyes that told her he was still fighting something inside himself. "You ordered my death this morning," she said. Her voice shook, but she made herself hold his gaze. "And now, I am supposed to thank you for saving me from your own order?" Draven's jaw tightened. "I am not asking for your thanks." "Then what do you want?" He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "My wolf has chosen you as his mate. I do not fully understand it myself. I did not choose this. But it has happened, and I cannot undo it, and I will not pretend it did not happen." Elira felt the air leave her lungs. Mate. She had heard the stories, the way the wolf inside an alpha could recognize a bond stronger than any law or ceremony. She had never imagined it happening to her, and certainly never imagined it happening with the man who had signed her death warrant only hours before. "I don't trust you," she said honestly. "You wanted me dead this morning." "I know," Draven said, and something in his voice sounded almost like shame. "I let fear and pressure guide a decision I should have questioned. I will not make that mistake again." She studied him, searching for a lie in his expression, but found none. Still, trust was not something she could hand over so easily, not after everything the pack had already taken from her. "I want to go home," she said quietly. "You are safer here," Draven answered. "Whoever set that fire is still out there. Until I know the truth, I need you close, where I can protect you." She did not want his protection, but she also did not have the strength to argue further that night, so she said nothing more, and Draven left her alone with the fire and her tangled thoughts. The days that followed were strange and slow. Elira remained in the palace, watched carefully by guards but treated with unexpected gentleness. Draven visited her often, sometimes to ask careful questions about the night of the fire, sometimes simply to sit near her in silence, as though his wolf needed the closeness even when neither of them had much to say. Slowly, despite herself, Elira began to see the man beneath the crown. She saw how exhausted he was, carrying a pack still grieving his father's murder. She saw the way his advisors spoke over him, the way Regent Malcolm always seemed to be pushing him toward harsher decisions. She began to understand that the cold king she had feared was, underneath it all, a young man drowning under the weight of a throne he had never wanted so soon. One evening, while walking together through the quiet palace gardens, Elira found the courage to ask the question that had haunted her for days. "Do you truly believe I set that fire?" Draven stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "No," he said. "I never truly believed it. I told myself I had no choice but to sign the order, but that was a lie I used to avoid facing my own fear of failing this pack. I am sorry, Elira. I should have protected you from the very beginning." It was the first time he had said her name, and something about hearing it in his voice, soft and sincere, cracked through the wall she had built around her heart. That same week, Draven's investigators uncovered evidence that changed everything. A stable hand, questioned quietly and promised safety, admitted he had seen a hooded figure near the grain stores the night of the fire, moving with familiar authority through the palace grounds. Further digging revealed payments made from Regent Malcolm's private accounts to two men known for setting fires for coin. Draven felt sick with fury and betrayal. His own uncle, his father's brother, had burned the pack's food supply and let an innocent woman take the blame, all to weaken Draven's rule and clear a path toward the throne for himself. When confronted, Malcolm did not bother denying it for long. His mask of loyalty fell away, revealing cold ambition underneath. "You were never fit to rule," Malcolm said, his voice full of contempt. "A boy who lets a stray Omega soften his judgment. The pack needs a real alpha." "Then let the pack decide," Draven said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "I challenge you formally, before witnesses, for the truth to be known. Malcolm, cornered and desperate, agreed, believing his years of hidden combat training would be enough to defeat his nephew. But he underestimated something crucial. He underestimated how far Draven would go to protect what mattered to him now. Before the challenge could take place, Malcolm made one final desperate move. He sent 2 hired men to eliminate Alira quietly, hoping to break Draven's resolve and throw the pack into enough chaos to seize control before any formal fight could happen. The men came for her at night, slipping past a distracted guard. But Alira was no longer the frightened woman from the stone circle. Days of fear had hardened into something steadier inside her. She fought back with a strength that surprised even herself, using a heavy candlestick to defend herself long enough for the palace guards to hear the struggle and come running. The attackers were captured, and under pressure, they confessed everything, naming Malcolm as the one who had ordered it. The formal challenge took place 2 days later, in the same stone circle where Alira had once knelt before an executioner's blade. This time, the entire pack gathered not in fear, but in tense anticipation of justice finally being served. Draven and Malcolm fought fiercely, wolf against wolf, years of buried resentment finally spilling into the open. Draven fought not just for his throne, but for every wrong decision he had let himself be pushed into, for his father's memory, and for the woman who had somehow become his entire reason to fight harder than he ever had before. In the end, Draven's strength and his sharpened resolve proved greater. Malcolm fell, and the pack fell silent, watching their king finally stand fully into the power and clarity he had been searching for since the day he took the crown. That night, standing before the entire Blackthorn pack, Draven made 2 announcements. The first was the formal end of the old superstition against Alira's bloodline, a decree that no descendant of her family would ever again be blamed for crimes they did not commit. The second announcement came as he turned to Alira, taking her hand gently in front of everyone. "I do not ask you to forget how we began," he said quietly, "only for her. I only ask you to let me spend the rest of my life making it right." Alira looked around at the pack that had once condemned her, now watching with quiet respect instead of fear. She looked at Draven, at the honesty in his eyes, at the king he had fought so hard to become. "I am not staying because your wolf chose me," she said softly. "I am staying because I choose you too." Snow began to fall gently over the stone circle as the pack knelt, not out of fear this time, but in genuine respect for their alpha king, and the Luna who had survived the very ground she now stood on. Draven pulled Alira close, and for the first time since his father's death, he felt something steady settle inside his chest. Winter had arrived, cold and quiet, but for Alira and Draven, it felt like the beginning of something warm.